The trail of blood in the snow led Ethan to a half-frozen woman who would shatter the walls he'd built around his guilt-ravaged heart. Her desperate fight for survival would force him to confront the one thing he'd fled to the wilderness to escape: the need for forgiveness. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The wind howled through the pines like a wounded animal, rattling the shutters of Ethan Morgan's cabin with increasing fury. Winter had come early to the mountains this year, bringing with it the kind of cold that seeped into bones and refused to leave. It had been 3 years since Ethan had retreated to this remote corner of Montana. 3 years of solitude broken only by the occasional supply run to the nearest town 30 miles south. 3 years of running from memories that chased him through nightmares and haunted his waking hours. Tonight, the storm matched his mood. Dark, relentless, unforgiving. He stoked the fire in the stone hearth, watching sparks spiral upward into the chimney's blackness. The flames cast dancing shadows across the rough-hewn logs of the walls, illuminating the sparse furnishings: a worn leather armchair, a table fashioned from a slice of pine trunk, shelves lined with dog-eared books. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress against the outside world. Ethan poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey and settled into the chair, his large frame tense despite the familiar ritual. At 42, his face was weathered, framed by a beard shot through with premature gray. His hands, once steady with surgical precision, now calloused from axe handles and rifle stocks, cupped the glass as if it might contain something more valuable than alcohol. The cabin creaked and groaned against the wind, familiar sounds that usually brought comfort in their constancy. But tonight, something felt different. An uneasiness had settled over him since dusk, a prickling sensation at the base of his neck that his years as an army medic had taught him never to ignore. His dog, Ranger, sensed it too. The German Shepherd had been restless all evening, pacing between the door and the fire, ears perked forward then flattened against his skull. Now he stood rigid, a low growl building in his chest. "What is it, boy?" Ethan set down his glass, instantly alert. Ranger's growl deepened, his focus fixed on the door. Then, barely audible beneath the storm's rage, came a sound that didn't belong: a dull thud against the porch steps, followed by what might have been a moan. Ethan reached for the rifle mounted above the fireplace, flicking off the safety with practiced ease. In 3 long strides, he crossed to the window beside the door and carefully pulled back the edge of the burlap curtain. At first he saw nothing but swirling snow and darkness. Then a movement caught his eye. A dark shape crumpled at the foot of his porch steps. Not an animal, a person. "Damn it," he muttered, setting the rifle aside but keeping his hunting knife strapped to his belt. Suspicion warred with the ingrained instinct to help. No one should be out in this storm, and no one should know about this cabin. He'd chosen it precisely for its isolation, miles from the nearest hiking trail or marked road. He unbolted the door and pushed it open against the force of the wind. Snow stung his face as he squinted into the darkness. "Hello?" he called out, receiving only the howl of the storm in response. The shape at the bottom of his steps didn't move. Ethan descended cautiously, Ranger at his heels. As he neared, the beam of his flashlight revealed a woman lying face down in the gathering snow, one arm outstretched toward his cabin as if in supplication. She wore a torn jacket, jeans, and hiking boots, not nearly enough protection against the elements. He crouched beside her, fingers automatically searching for a pulse at her neck. It was there, weak but steady. Gently he turned her over. Her face was pale as the snow around her, marred by a gash across her forehead that had left a trail of half-frozen blood down her cheek. Her lips were blue with cold, but she was breathing. What struck him most, though, were the numerous cuts and bruises visible on her hands and face, injuries not caused by a simple fall. "Miss, can you hear me?" he asked, knowing she was too far gone to respond. Decision made, Ethan slid his arms beneath her shoulders and knees, lifting her with a grunt. She was lighter than she looked, her body alarmingly cold against his chest. Ranger circled anxiously as Ethan carried her up the steps and through the door, kicking it shut behind them. He laid her on the couch near the fire, quickly gathering blankets and his medical kit. As the light fell fully on her face, he estimated she was in her early 30s. Her features, though strained with pain even in unconsciousness, had a delicate strength to them. Dark hair tumbled past her shoulders, matted with snow and what looked like dried blood. Working methodically, Ethan removed her soaked jacket and boots. The extent of her injuries became clear: bruised ribs, a possible sprained wrist, defensive wounds on her forearms, and what appeared to be a knife cut along her side that had bled through her shirt. None immediately life-threatening, but concerning enough, especially combined with severe hypothermia. "What the hell happened to you?" he murmured, though he recognized the pattern of injuries. She hadn't just been caught in the storm. She'd been running from something or someone. He cleaned and bandaged her wounds, grateful that his medical training hadn't abandoned him despite years of disuse. Her skin gradually warmed under his ministrations and a hint of color returned to her cheeks. Still, she didn't wake, and Ethan knew she was far from stable. As he worked, theories tumbled through his mind. A hiker who'd gotten lost and been attacked by an animal? Unlikely, given the defensive wounds. A tourist who'd wandered too far from the marked trails? Possibly, though the nearest trailhead was over 15 miles away. A run away from one of the nearby towns. The most plausible explanation, though something about her didn't fit the profile. Regardless, her presence threatened the careful isolation he'd constructed. Once she woke, there would be questions, explanation, involvement, everything he'd fled to this mountainside to escape. Ethan checked her pockets for identification, finding nothing but a crumpled $5 bill and a smooth stone worn on one side like a worry token. No wallet, no phone, no keys. Either she'd lost them or she'd deliberately left them behind. He finished dressing her wounds, then pulled the blankets up to her chin. Her breathing had steadied, her body temperature slowly rising to safer levels. All he could do now was wait and prepare for whatever complications her arrival might bring. Ranger settled on the floor beside the couch, his protective instinct apparently overriding his earlier suspicion. The dog's eyes remained fixed on the woman's face as if willing her to wake. Ethan returned to his chair, whiskey forgotten, and watched the rise and fall of her chest. The storm outside intensified, snow piling against the windows, wind screaming through the trees. Inside, the fire crackled, throwing warm light over the unexpected tableau. A woman whose story he didn't know, a man who thought he'd left stories behind, and the uncertain space between them. Just before midnight, she stirred, a small movement at first, fingers twitching beneath the blanket, eyelids fluttering. Then suddenly she bolted upright with a gasp that transformed into a cry of pain as her injuries protested the movement. Her eyes, wide and disoriented, darted around the cabin before fixing on Ethan with a look of pure terror. She scrambled backward on the couch, wincing but determined, her hand reaching instinctively for a weapon that wasn't there. "Stay back," she warned, voice hoarse but firm. "Don't come any closer." Ethan raised his hand slowly, remaining seated. "You're safe," he said, keeping his tone even. "You collapsed outside my cabin. I brought you in from the storm." She glanced toward the window, where nothing was visible but darkness and snow. Her shoulders remained tense, poised for flight despite her obvious weakness. "Where am I?" she demanded. "About 60 miles northeast of Whitefish from my cabin. Middle of nowhere, which is probably why you're still alive instead of frozen solid." He gestured toward her bandaged side. "You're hurt, badly, and you've got hypothermia." The woman's gaze dropped to her bandaged wounds, then back to his face, suspicion warring with the reality of her situation. "Who are you, Ethan Morgan?" "This is Ranger." He nodded toward the dog, who watched the exchange with alert interest. "And you are?" She hesitated, calculating something behind her guarded eyes. "Anna," she finally said. "Anna Hayes." Ethan nodded, though he wasn't certain he believed her. "Well, Anna Hayes, you're welcome to tell me what happened to you, or not. But you're not going anywhere in this storm, and those injuries need time to heal." Anna's eyes darted to the door, then back to him, measuring the distance, assessing her chances. "Don't," Ethan said quietly. "You wouldn't make it a mile in this weather, even if you weren't injured." Her shoulders slumped slightly, the fight momentarily leaving her as reality set in. She was trapped here with him, at least until the storm passed. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the pop and hiss of burning logs. Outside, the wind continued its assault on the cabin, a reminder of the hostile world beyond these walls. Inside, two strangers regarded each other across a gulf of secrets neither seemed willing to bridge. Anna flinched as Ethan rose from his chair, but he moved deliberately, making no sudden gestures. "You need water," he said, not a question but a statement of fact, "and something for the pain." She watched him cross to the kitchen area, her eyes never leaving his back, and the cabin was small enough that she could track his every movement, filling a glass from a pitcher, opening a cabinet to remove a bottle of pills. Her throat burned with thirst, but trust came harder than hunger. "It's just ibuprofen," he said, returning with the glass and 2 tablets. "Not strong enough for what you need, but it'll take the edge off." Her fingers trembled as she accepted the water, but she set the pills aside. "Water first," she murmured, taking careful sips. Each swallow sent pain rippling through her ribs. Ethan nodded and returned to his chair, maintaining distance. He had the patient stillness of someone accustomed to waiting for wounds to heal, for storms to pass, for danger to reveal itself. "How long was I unconscious?" Anna asked, her voice steadier now. "About 3 hours since I found you." "No tellin' how long you were out there before that." She absorbed this information, glancing at the bandages around her wrist and the ones visible beneath the oversized flannel shirt he must have put on her after removing her wet clothes. The realization made her tense again. "Your clothes were soaked through," he explained, reading her thoughts. "Hypothermia protocol. I'm a medic, was a medic. Army, 3 tours. Anna's eyes narrowed. "You just happen to be a medic?" "Trust me, I'm as surprised by the coincidence as you are." His mouth quirked in what might have been a smile on a face that looked like it had forgotten how. "What were you doing out in that storm?" She hesitated, taking another sip of water instead of answering. "Let me rephrase," Ethan said. "Who cut you with a knife?" Her eyes snapped to his, startled by the direct question. "That gash on your side," he elaborated. "It's a knife wound, clean edge, shallow angle, defensive injury. Someone came at you from the front, you turned to evade. Not your first rodeo either, judging by how you positioned yourself when you woke up." Anna set the glass down. "You're very observant, trained to be, and you live alone out here because—" "We're not talking about me." His tone remained neutral, but a shadow passed behind his eyes. The fire popped loudly, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. Ranger's ears twitched at the sound, but his eyes remained on Anna, patient and watchful. Anna fingered the edge of the blanket, weighing her options. This stranger had saved her life, but revealing too much could endanger them both. The storm gave her time she desperately needed, but it also trapped her with a man whose motives she couldn't be sure of. I was hiking, she began, testing the waters with a partial truth. Got caught in the storm, must have fallen. Ethan's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Hiking. In late November, with no gear, no ID, and knife wounds. When she didn't respond, he continued. Look, I don't care what trouble that's your business. But whoever gave you those injuries might come looking, and that makes it my business. Anna closed her eyes briefly, fatigue and pain washing over her in equal measure. No one will come looking, she said finally. Not in this storm. And after that, ... She shook her head. I covered my tracks. Professional tracker, are you? Something like that. She met his gaze directly for the first time. I didn't mean to involve you in this. Once the storm breaks, I'll be gone. Ethan leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. Psst, those injuries need more than a night to heal. The cut on your side isn't deep enough for stitches, but it's not nothing. Ribs are bruised, maybe cracked, and you nearly froze to death. You try hiking out of these mountains tomorrow. You won't make it 5 miles. I've survived worse. Not my first rodeo either, he countered, echoing her evasiveness. I know what someone running for their life looks like. The bluntness of his assessment hung in the air between them. Anna looked away first, her gaze falling on the hypnotic dance of flames in the fireplace. Outside, the wind howled like something wounded and angry. I'm not going to hurt you, Ethan said quietly after a long moment, and I'm not going to turn you into whoever it is you're running from, but I need to know if I should be expecting company of the armed and dangerous variety. Anna's laugh was bitter and brief. You really do live off the grid, don't you? No TV, no internet, radio for emergencies. Otherwise, no. That a problem? She shook her head slowly. No. It's actually perfect. Something like relief flickered across her face before the guarded expression returned. You haven't seen the news in the last 48 hours, have you? Is that when whatever happened to you happened? Anna nodded, wincing as pain shot through her temple. She reached for the ibuprofen tablets she'd set aside earlier and swallowed them with the last of her water. There was a situation in Whitefish, she said carefully. A man died. They think I killed him. Ethan's expression remained impassive. Did you? The directness of the question caught her off guard. Not judgment or horror, just a simple request for information. No, she said, meeting his eyes steadily. But I was there, and I ran, which makes me guilty enough for the people looking for me. Police, among others. He absorbed this, his gaze analytical but not condemning. The knife wound? His partner. He caught up to me about 10 miles from town near the old fire road. Her hand unconsciously drifted to her bandaged side. I got away. Barely. Partner in what? Anna's expression closed again. I've said enough. More than is safe for either of us. Ethan studied her for a long moment, then nodded once, accepting the boundary. He stood and moved to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peer into the swirling darkness. Storm's getting worse. Forecast said it could last 3 days. You get forecasts out here? Weather radio? Some things are worth staying connected to. He let the curtain fall back into place and turned toward her. Hungry? The abrupt change of subject startled her, but the mention of food awakened a gnawing emptiness in her stomach. She nodded cautiously. Not much in the way of options. Venison stew or venison stew? Tough choice, Anna replied, the ghost of a smile touching her lips for the first time. Ethan moved to the small kitchen area where a pot already simmered on the wood stove. The domesticity of the gesture, this gruff, solitary man preparing food, struck Anna as incongruous with his hardened exterior. She watched him ladle stew into 2 bowls, his movements efficient and practiced. Ranger padded over to her while Ethan was occupied with the foods. The dog regarded her solemnly before placing his muzzle gently on the edge of the couch, dark eyes fixed on her face. Anna hesitated, then slowly extended her hand. Ranger sniffed her fingers, his tail giving a single tentative wag. He doesn't warm up to people often, Ethan commented, returning with the bowl. Consider yourself special. Anna withdrew her hand as she accepted the food. I'm not special, just lucky. Or unlucky, depending on how you look at it. Surviving what you've been through in the last 2 days? I'd call that something. He sat across from her again, balancing his bowl on one knee. Eat, then rest. Questions and answers can wait. The stew was rich and hearty, warming her from the inside out in a way the fire couldn't. Anna ate slowly, savoring each bite, aware that it was the first real meal she'd had since everything went wrong. Exhaustion pulled at her, the weight of fear and flight and injury settling into her bones now that the immediate danger had passed. Ethan ate in silence, seemingly content with the absence of conversation. Occasionally his gaze would drift to the window or door, a habit born of vigilance rather than expectation. The storm continued its assault on the cabin, a constant reminder of the hostile world outside and the fragile shelter within. When she'd finished eating, Anna set the bowl aside, her eyelids growing heavy despite her determination to stay alert. The warmth, the food, and the relative safety conspired against her caution. Sleep, Ethan said, taking the empty bowl. You're safe enough for now. She wanted to resist, to maintain the wariness that had kept her alive this long, but her body had other ideas. Her eyes closed of their own accord, consciousness slipping away like water through cupped hands. The last thing she registered was Ethan draping another blanket over her and the weight of Ranger settling on the floor beside the couch, a silent sentinel against the night. Anna woke to the scent of coffee and the persistent howl of wind. For a moment, disorientation gripped her. The unfamiliar ceiling, the weight of blankets, the dull throb of pain throughout her body. Then memory rushed back. The storm, the cabin, the man who had saved her. Sunlight filtered weakly through the windows, revealing the cabin in daylight for the first time. Though small, it was meticulously organized. Shelves of preserved food and supplies, a rack of tools hanging from pegs, stacked firewood along one wall. Everything in its place, a soldier's discipline evident in every corner. She shifted cautiously, testing the limits of her injuries. The pain was still there, but duller now, more manageable. Her muscles protested as she pushed herself to sitting, but she gritted her teeth and forced herself upright. Ethan stood at the wood stove, his back to her. The simple domesticity of the scene, a man making breakfast in a quiet cabin, struck her as surreal after the chaos of the past week. Ranger lay near the hearth, but lifted his head when he sensed her movement, ears perking forward. "Morning," Ethan said without turning. "Storm's still going strong." Anna glanced toward the window. Outside, snow continued to fall in thick curtains, the world beyond reduced to white chaos. The wind battered the cabin walls, finding every crack and crevice to whistle through. "What time is it?" Her voice was rough with sleep. "Just past 8. He turned, a mug in each hand, and crossed to where she sat. "Coffee. Black. Don't have much else to offer." She accepted the mug gratefully, wrapping her fingers around its warmth. "Thank you." Ethan nodded once, then returned to the stove where a pan of something sizzled softly. The silence between them wasn't comfortable exactly, but neither was it as charged with suspicion as the night before. Exhaustion and pain had a way of stripping away pretense. "How long do these storms usually last?" Anna asked after taking a sip of the strong coffee. "This time of year? 2, 3 days? Sometimes longer." He glanced over his shoulder. "This one feels stubborn, like everything else out here," she murmured. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "You noticed?" He brought over 2 plates, each bearing a modest portion of fried potatoes and what looked like venison. "Not much, but it'll help with healing." Anna hadn't realized how hungry she was until the food was in front of her. She ate carefully at first, then with increasing urgency as her body reminded her how long it had been since she'd had a proper meal. "Careful," Ethan warned. "Too fast after too little will make you sick." She slowed obediently, studying him as she chewed. In daylight, the lines around his eyes were more pronounced, the silver threading through his beard more evident. Not old, but weathered by time, by experience, by whatever had driven him to this isolated existence. "Why are you helping me?" she asked abruptly. Ethan paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. "Would you prefer I'd left you in the snow?" "No, but..." She set her plate aside. "You don't know me. You have no reason to trust what I've told you, which isn't much. Yet you're feeding me, sheltering me." He finished his bite before responding. "Basic humanity doesn't require trust. In my experience, it usually comes with conditions. Then you've had poor experiences." He met her gaze evenly. "Or you've been dealing with the wrong kind of people." Anna laughed without humor. "You have no idea. Try me." The challenge was quiet but unmistakable. She studied him, weighing the risk. This man was still a stranger despite his kindness, and yet something about his steady presence, the lack of judgment in his eyes, made her want to unburden herself. "I was a forensic accountant," she began, surprising herself with the admission, "for the Montana Department of Justice, specialized in financial crimes, money laundering, tax evasion, fraud." Ethan said nothing, waiting for her to continue. 6 months ago, I was assigned to investigate discrepancies in accounts connected to several businesses in Whitefisher Resort, a restaurant chain, a property development company. On paper, they were separate entities with different owners, but I found patterns suggesting they were all fronts for the same operation. She sipped her coffee, gathering her thoughts. "I followed the money trail to a man named Victor Crane, real estate developer, major political donor, pillars of the community type, but his legitimate businesses were just the surface. Underneath, drug trafficking, human trafficking, protection rackets." "And you got proof?" Ethan guessed. Anna nodded. "Enough to bring to my superiors." That's when things started going wrong. Files disappeared from secure servers. Evidence went missing. Then I found out my department head was on Crane's payroll. "So you went outside the chain of command." I tried. Her fingers tightened around the mug. "Contacted the FBI. Had a meeting set up with an agent in Kalispell. The night before, someone broke into my apartment. I barely got out. When I reached the meeting point, the agent was dead." Ethan's expression remained neutral, but his eyes sharpened. "And Crane?" "Found dead in his office the next morning. Shot with the same caliber weapon used on the agent." Anna's voice hardened. "A weapon registered to me, which had been stolen from my apartment during the break-in. My fingerprints were found at both scenes." "Perfect frame," Ethan murmured. "Too perfect." They knew exactly what they were doing. She set her mug down with careful precision. "I've been running ever since. 3 days ago, I was recognized at a gas station outside of Whitefish. Crane's head of security man named Mercer caught up to me near the National Forest boundary." "The knife?" She nodded. "I got lucky. He slipped on ice during the struggle, hit his head on a rock. I took his car and drove as far as I could into the mountains. But the storm hit, and the roads became impassable. I abandoned the car and continued on foot, hoping to reach a ranger station I remembered from a hiking trip years ago." "You were heading the wrong direction," Ethan said. "Nearest station is 20 miles southwest of here." I realized that too late. By then, I was disoriented, freezing. She looked up at him. "Then I saw smoke from your chimney." Ethan absorbed her story in silence. his face giving away nothing of his thoughts. Anna waited, tension building in her shoulders as the seconds ticked by. "You could have made all that up," he finally said. "I could have, but you didn't." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "No." He rose and carried their plates to the small sink. The mundane action seemed incongruous after her revelation. "You said Crane's operation involved trafficking, people and drugs?" Anna nodded. "Mainly young women from Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia, and prescription opioids diverted from legal channels. Big operation, huge, and well protected. The corruption goes deep. Local police, state officials, possibly federal." Ethan turned to face her, leaning against the counter. "Which means your chances of clearing your name through official channels are slim to none. Now you understand why I need to keep moving." Anna shifted, wincing as pain shot through her ribs. "I need to get to the evidence I've hidden, make contact with someone I still trust at the Justice Department. Not in this storm." "You don't." Ethan gestured toward the window. "And not with those injuries. You try hiking out now, you'll be dead within hours. I don't have the luxury of time. Dead people have all the time in the world." His tone was matter of fact. "If what you say is true, Mercer wasn't working alone. They'll assume you died in the storm, which buys you a few days." Anna wanted to argue, but the logic was sound. Her body betrayed her with a violent shiver, reminding her how close she'd come to freezing to death. "Why are you still helping? I've just told you I'm wanted for murder. I've brought danger to your doorstep." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then, with deliberate movements, he rolled up his left sleeve to reveal a forearm marked by an intricate scar burn that had healed poorly, leaving a web of damaged tissue from wrist to elbow. "Baghdad, 2007. He said quietly. "Our convoy hit an IED. I pulled 4 men from the burning Humvee before the ammunition started cooking off. Last one was trapped under the dashboard. By the time I got him out, we were both on fire." He rolled the sleeve back down. "Sometimes people get caught in situations not of their making. Sometimes the only choice is between bad and worse. I learned to recognize the difference between those running from justice and those running for justice." His eyes met hers, the intensity in them making her breath catch. "I believe you, Anna, and I'll help you stay alive long enough to prove it." The declaration hung in the air between them, altering the atmosphere in the small cabin. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, Anna felt something dangerously close to hope. The ranger broke the moment by rising suddenly, ears pricked toward the door. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Ethan was instantly alert, moving to the window with practiced stealth. He peered through a gap in the curtain, body tense. After a long moment, he relaxed slightly. "Deer," he explained. Wind spooked them, but his hand remained near the rifle propped by the door, and his eyes continued to scan the white wasteland beyond the cabin. The brief moment of connection between them had passed, replaced once more by the vigilance of people accustomed to danger. Outside, the storm continued unabated, snow piling higher against the windows, wind shrieking through the pines. Inside, an uneasy alliance had been formed, fragile as the first ice of winter, necessary as shelter from the storm. By mid-afternoon, the cabin had fallen into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Ethan chopping more firewood in the small covered shed attached to the cabin. Anna resting but alert, Ranger alternating between watching the door and settling near the couch where she lay. The storm showed no signs of relenting, snow piling higher against the windows with each passing hour. Anna had managed to stand and make her way to the small bathroom tucked behind a partition in the corner, her movements slow but determined. The simple act of walking had left her exhausted but triumphant. Recovery would be measured in small victories. "Your bandages need changing," Ethan announced, returning from the woodshed with an armful of split logs. He stacked them neatly by the fireplace before washing his hands in the basin. Anna tensed slightly. The clinical necessity of his care had been easier to accept when she'd been half-conscious. Now, fully awake and increasingly aware of her vulnerability, the prospect of his hands on her wounds felt more intimate, more exposed. He seemed to read her discomfort. "I can walk you through it if you'd prefer to do it yourself, but some of them will be hard to reach." She hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Go ahead." Ethan gathered his medical supplies and set them on the small table beside the couch. His movements were brisk and professional as he helped her ease the borrowed flannel shirt aside to expose the bandage on her ribs. "This is healing clean," he commented as he peeled away the old dressing. "No signs of infection." Anna looked down at the angry red line across her side. Guess Mercer kept his knife sharp. Small mercies. Ethan applied an antibiotic ointment with careful precision. His fingers were calloused but gentle, touching only what was necessary, maintaining the boundary between healer and patient with practiced discipline. "You were good at this," Anna observed. "As a medic." Something flashed across his face. Pain or pride? She couldn't tell. "Had plenty of practice. Why did you leave?" The question slipped out before she could consider it. His hands paused momentarily before resuming their work. 3 tours was enough. For most people, yes, she pressed. But not for someone who'd found their calling. Ethan secured the new bandage and moved to check the cuts on her forearm. His silence stretched long enough that Anna thought he wouldn't answer. "Last tour, our forward operating base was hit with mortar fire," he finally said, voice flat. The hospital tent took a direct hit. I was doing round. 23 patients, 4 nurses, 2 doctors. I was the only one who walked out. The weight of those words hung in the air between them. Anna's throat tight. Survivor's guilt, she said softly. His eyes flicked to hers, sharp with surprise or recognition. Something like that. Is that why you're out here? Punishing yourself for surviving? Ethan's jaw tightened. Is that why you became an accountant to psychoanalyze people? The sudden edge in his voice made her withdraw slightly. Sorry, I didn't mean to pry. He finished checking her other wounds in silence. His touch still careful but more distant now. When he'd finished, he packed away the supplies with military precision. Your turn, he said unexpectedly, sitting back in his chair. Anna frowned. My turn for what? You told me why you're running, not why you were looking into Crane in the first place. Financial crimes investigation, that's your job, but you pushed harder than most would. Made it personal. She hadn't expected him to be so perceptive or so direct. What makes you think it was personal? Experience. His eyes held hers steadily. People who risk everything usually have a reason beyond professional duty. Anna looked away, her gaze finding the flames in the fireplace. The wood popped and crackled, sending sparks dancing up the chimney. Outside, the wind moaned around the eaves. My sister, she said finally. Emily. She disappeared 3 years ago. College student at Montana State, home for spring break. Went out with friends one night and never came home. Ethan waited, giving her space to continue at her own pace. Police said she probably ran off with a boyfriend or decided to start over somewhere, but I knew Emily. She wouldn't have left without saying goodbye. Anna's voice hardened. 6 months ago, I was reviewing financial records for a case and found a payment pattern that looked familiar, similar to something I'd seen when I was looking into Emily's disappearance on my own time. You traced it to Crane, she nodded. Not directly at first. It was buried under layers of shell companies and offshore accounts. But once I started digging, I found connections between his businesses and disappearances of other young women. Not just in Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Eastern Washington. You think he was involved in your sister's disappearance? I know he was. Her hands clenched into fists despite the pain. 2 weeks before he was killed, I found a storage unit registered to one of his shell companies. Inside was a box of personal effects, jewelry, ID cards, photos. Emily's necklace was there, a silver pendant our grandmother gave her. Ethan absorbed this, his expression grave. Did you find any proof she's still alive? No. The word hung between them, heavy with grief, but I found evidence that Crane's operation didn't die with him. Someone else has taken over, someone connected to the corruption in law enforcement that I uncovered, which is why they needed you silenced. Dead, preferably. Anna's laugh held no humor. I was getting too close to names that couldn't afford to be exposed. Ethan rose and moved to the window, peering out at the blanketed landscape. The daylight was already fading, the short winter day surrendering to an early dusk. You said you have evidence hidden somewhere, a backup of everything I found. Financial records, communication logs, photos, names, enough to bring down not just the trafficking operation but everyone protecting it. Where? Anna hesitated, the instinct for secrecy warring with the need for trust. A safety deposit box in Missoula, registered under a name they don't know about. The key is hidden at my family's old cabin on Flathead Lake. Ethan turned to face her. That's at least 100 miles from here. I know. She shifted, wincing as her ribs protested. Once the storm breaks, I need to get there before they realize I'm still alive. You won't make it alone. Not in this condition. Not in this terrain. I don't have a choice. His eyes held hers for a long moment. Yes, you do. The implication hung in the air between them. Before Anna could respond, Ranger's head snapped up, ears alert. A low growl rumbled in his chest as he rose to his feet, moving deliberately toward the door. Ethan was instantly in motion, hand reaching for the rifle. Stay down, he ordered Anna, voice barely above a whisper. Heart racing, Anna eased herself lower on the couch, eyes fixed on Ethan as he moved silently to the window. The transformation was immediate and complete, the reserved caretaker replaced by a soldier. Every movement economical and precise. He edged the curtain aside just enough to peer out, body angled to present the smallest possible target. For several tense seconds, he remained motionless, scanning the landscape with practiced eyes. What is it? Anna whispered. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Attention focused on something beyond the glass. Then his shoulders relaxed fractionally, like a mountain lion hunting near the tree line. Relief washed through her, followed quickly by renewed tension. Will it come closer? Not likely. They avoid human settlements, even isolated ones. He let the curtain fall back into place, but remained vigilant. Storms forcing wildlife to move, look for shelter. We'll need to be careful when it breaks. Anna nodded, the adrenaline slowly ebbing from her system. The brief alarm had reminded her how precarious their situation remained, not just from the elements, but from the constant threat of discovery. You should get more rest, Ethan said, returning to his chair. Your body needs it to heal. She knew he was right, but the prospect of sleep brought its own anxieties. Every time I close my eyes, I see Mercer's face. Feel the knife. Ethan's expression softened almost imperceptibly. I know something about that. Does it ever go away? She asked, suddenly desperate for reassurance from someone who might understand. No. His honesty was gentle but uncompromising, but you learn to live alongside it, make room for it without letting it consume you. How? He considered this, looking toward the fire as if the answer might be found in the dancing flames. By remembering that surviving isn't the same as living, one's just breathing, the other's a choice you make every day. The simple wisdom of his words settled over her like a blanket, not erasing her fear but somehow making it more manageable. Is that why you're really out here? To find the difference? Ethan met her gaze, something unreadable shifting behind his eyes. Maybe I'm still looking. The admission, small as it was, felt significant, a crack in the carefully maintained wall between them. Anna found herself wanting to reach through that crack, to understand the man who had saved her life not once but twice now. Instead, she closed her eyes, exhaustion finally overcoming vigilance. The last thing she heard before sleep claimed her was the soft sound of Ethan adding another log to the fire. The quiet domesticity of it somehow more comforting than any words of reassurance could have been. Dawn brought a subtle shift in the storm's ferocity. The wind no longer screamed but merely howled, and the snow fell in gentle curtains rather than blinding sheets. Ethan stood at the window, coffee in hand, studying the transformed landscape. 3 feet of fresh powder blanketed everything in sight, the drifts against the cabin reaching halfway up the windows on the windward side. "It's breaking," he said as Anna stirred on the couch. She pushed herself up, moving with less pain than the day before. "How can you tell?" "Barometric pressure, and the winds changed direction." He gestured toward the ceiling. "Listen." Anna tilted her head, hearing the difference. A softer sound, less insistent. "How much longer?" "Day, maybe 2. Enough time to prepare." She raised an eyebrow. "Prepare for what?" Ethan turned from the window. "Getting you to that cabin on Flathead Lake." The simple declaration hung in the air between them. Anna searched his face, looking for hesitation or uncertainty, finding none. "Why would you risk that?" she asked quietly. "You've already done more than anyone could expect." He shrugged, the gesture incongruously casual given the weight of the commitment. "Told you yesterday you won't make it alone. It's not your fight. Learned a long time ago that sometimes you don't choose the fight. It chooses you." He crossed to the kitchenette, refilling his mug. "Besides, seems to me what you're trying to expose, trafficking, corruption, that's everyone's fight. Or should be." Anna watched him, still uncertain of his motives, but increasingly sure of his resolve. "These people won't stop. If they find out you help me, they'd have to find me first." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I've gotten pretty good at not being found." The confidence in his voice wasn't bravado. It was the simple certainty of a man who knew his capability. For the first time, Anna looked beyond the medic to the soldier underneath, wondering exactly what his military service had entailed. "You weren't just a medic, were you?" she ventured. Ethan's eyes met hers, something unreadable passing through them. "Special Forces Combat Medic. 7th Group." The admission explained much. His vigilance, his self-sufficiency, his composed response to danger. Green Berets were the elite among the elite, trained for extended operations in hostile territory with minimal support. "That changes things," she said softly. "Does it? It means I might actually have a chance." He acknowledged this with a slight nod, then changed the subject. "You should try walking a bit more today. Build your strength. We'll need to move fast once the weather clears." Anna pushed aside the blankets and carefully swung her legs to the floor. The pain in her ribs had dulled to a persistent ache, and the dizziness that had plagued her yesterday had mostly subsided. Still, standing required effort, her muscles protesting after days of inactivity and trauma. Ethan watched but didn't offer help, understanding instinctively that she needed to do this herself. She took a few experimental steps, one hand braced against the wall for support. Each movement became more fluid than the last as her body remembered its strength. "Better than I expected," she admitted. "Your body wants to heal. Just don't push too hard." She made a slow circuit of the cabin, taking stock of her surroundings more thoroughly than she'd been able to before. The space was roughly 20 feet square, every inch utilized with military efficiency. A small loft above held what appeared to be Ethan's sleeping quarters, accessible by a ladder secured to the wall. The main floor contained the living area, kitchen, and a curtained-off section that served as a bathroom. What caught her attention, though, was the bookshelf. It held an eclectic collection of medical texts alongside philosophy, tactical manuals beside classic literature. Titles by Hemingway, Thoreau, Marcus Aurelius, and Sun Tzu stood shoulder to shoulder. "Not what you'd expect from a hermit in the woods?" Ethan asked, noticing her interest. "Actually, it's exactly what I'd expect from you." She ran her finger along the spine. "A man who thinks while he watches." Something shifted in his expression, surprise. Perhaps it being so accurately read. By midday, Anna was moving more confidently around the cabin. Her strength returned in increments, fueled by the simple meals Ethan prepared and the first real rest she'd had in days. Outside, the storm continued its gradual retreat, patches of pale blue occasionally visible between snow-heavy clouds. Ethan spent the afternoon gathering supplies, taking inventory, checking equipment. His preparations were methodical and thorough, each item evaluated for its utility, each decision weighed against their limited capacity to carry. "We'll need to travel light, fast," he explained, laying out a topographical map on the table. "Cross-country skis for the first 10 miles until we hit the logging road here." Single quotes, his finger traced a path across the paper. "If it's passable, we might find a vehicle I keep hidden about 5 miles in. If not, we continue on foot to the highway junction." Anna studied the route. That's at least 20 miles through difficult terrain. 23. 2 days if the weather holds and you're up to it. I will be. Her determination left no room for doubt. Ethan folded the map carefully. Once we reach the highway, we have options. Depending on the situation, we could risk public transportation or acquire another vehicle. Steal one, borrow, he corrected, the faintest hint of humor in his eye. Anna found herself smiling despite the gravity of their situation. Is that what they taught you in Special Forces? Creative requisitioning? Among other things. He put the map away and began checking a compact first aid kit. What about after we get the key? Missoula's another 100 miles from Flathead. I have a contact there. Former colleague who left the department before things went bad. If I can reach her securely, she might help us. Ethan nodded, absorbing this. Any chance your pursuers know about the cabin or your friend in Missoula? The cabin, maybe. It's been in my family for generations, though it's not in my name. As for Diane, we were careful. Communicated through encrypted channels, burner phones. Good. Still, we'll need to approach both locations with extreme caution. He closed the first aid kit. Anyone else you trust? Anyone who might be looking for you? Anna hesitated. No family, not anymore. A few friends, but I've kept them at a distance since Emily disappeared. Didn't want to put them at risk. The isolation in her voice struck a chord with Ethan. He recognized it all too well, the self-imposed solitude of someone who feared what their proximity might cost others. Dinner, he said abruptly, moving to the stove. You should eat while you can. Once we start moving, meals get irregular. They ate in companionable silence as evening settled over the mountains. The wind had dropped to an occasional whisper and the snow had all but stopped, few stray flakes drifting past the windows like afterthoughts. Tell me about Emily, Ethan said suddenly. Anna looked up, startled by the request. You don't have to, he added, but sometimes remembering why we fight helps strengthen the resolve to continue. She set down her fork, considering. No one had asked her about Emily in a long time. Most people in her life had learned to avoid the subject, unsure how to navigate her grief. She was brilliant, Anna began, the words coming easier than she expected. Molecular biology major, wanted to cure cancer, save the world. Always had 10 different projects going at once. A smile touched her lips. Drove me crazy growing up, her half-finished experiments all over our shared bathroom. Frog dissections in the garage, Petri dishes in the refrigerator. Sounds like a handful. She was, but also the kindest person I've ever known. Anna's voice softened. When our parents died, car accident, my senior year of college, she was only 16. I became her guardian. We got through it together. That explains a lot about you, Ethan observed. What do you mean? Why you push so hard? Why you won't give up? His eyes held hers. She was more than your sister. She was your responsibility. The simple truth of it tightened Anna's throat. Yes, and you feel you failed her. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Every day. Ethan was quiet for a moment. My unit in Afghanistan, 12 men. I was responsible for keeping them alive, patching them up when they got hit. Lost 2 in my first tour, another in my second. Each one felt like a personal failure. It wasn't your fault, Anna said, automatic. Probably not yours either. The gentle redirection of her own reassurance back to her left Anna momentarily speechless. Before she could respond, Ranger's head lifted sharply, his body tense. Ethan was instantly alert, raising a hand for silence. They listened together, straining to hear what had disturbed the dog. At first, nothing but the settling of the cabin and the occasional creak of snow-laden branches outside. Then, a faint but distinctive sound, the distant buzz of an engine. Ethan moved to the window, peering out into the gathering darkness. Snowmobile, maybe 2. His voice had gone flat, all emotion carefully packed away. Still miles out, but head in this direction. Could be anyone, Anna said, not believing it herself. Locals? Park rangers? No one comes this far out, especially after a storm like this. Ethan's expression was grim. No coincidence. Their searching patterns. Fear coiled in Anna's stomach. How did they find us? Doesn't matter now. What matters is they haven't found us yet. He moved with sudden purpose, gathering essential supplies. Get your boots on. We're leaving. Now? At night? Darkness is our advantage. He tossed her a heavy coat from a peg by the door. They'll be expecting you to hole up somewhere, wait out the storm, not move through it. Anna pushed through her fear, forcing herself into action. Every movement sent pain radiating through her healing injuries, but adrenaline dulled the edges. What about your cabin? Your things? Ethan paused, looking around at the space that had been his sanctuary for 3 years. Something like regret flashed across his face before his expression hardened with resolve. Just things, he said quietly, not worth a life. They slipped out through the cabin's rear exit, a narrow door. Ethan had built precisely for situations that required discretion. The night embraced them with bitter cold, the temperature having plummeted after sunset. The snow lay deep and pristine, reflecting starlight in crystalline pattern. Under different circumstances, the scene might have been beautiful. Ethan led the way, breaking trail through the heavy powder. He wore a white thermal parka that rendered him nearly invisible against the snow and carried a pack containing only essential supplies. Anna followed in his footsteps, her borrowed clothes far too large but adequate for warmth. Ranger moved silently alongside them, occasionally ranging ahead before returning to their side. Stay in my tracks, Ethan instructed, his voice barely above a whisper. Step exactly where I step. We need to minimize our trail as much as possible. Anna nodded, conserving her breath for the effort of move. Every step was a negotiation with pain, but she pushed it aside, focusing on the rhythm of their progress. Forward. Breathe. Forward again. The sound of the snowmobiles remained distant but persistent, a mechanical intrusion in the wilderness silence. They moved through a stand of pines, the snow not as deep beneath the sheltering branches. Ethan set a deliberate pace, not too fast to exhaust Anna's limited reserves, but quick enough to put distance between themselves and the approaching threat. The weight of the rifle slung across his back seemed to have no impact on his movement. He navigated the terrain with the confidence of someone who had made the wilderness his home. After 30 minutes of steady progress, he paused in a small clearing, allowing Anna a moment to rest. Her breath came in visible plumes, lungs burning from the exertion in cold air. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. "I'm good," she managed, the lie transparent but necessary. They both knew stopping wasn't an option. Ethan's eyes narrowed as he assessed her condition. "There's a ridge ahead. Once we cross it, the terrain drops toward a ravine. The going will be easier, and the trees are thicker, better cover." Anna nodded, gathering her strength for the next push. The distant drone of engines had faded slightly, suggesting their pursuers had changed direction. A temporary reprieve. Nothing more. "They're searching in a grid pattern," Ethan explained, reading her thoughts. "Standard procedure. If they find the cabin, they'll widen the search radius. I built it to blend in." Nestled into the hillside, covered exits, chimney designed to disperse smoke, hard to spot unless you know what you're looking for. Single quotes. Despite their situation, Anna felt a flicker of admiration. You really didn't want to be found. Something darkened in his expression. "Let's keep moving." They pressed on, ascending the gentle slope toward the ridge. The exertion sent waves of pain through Anna's healing injuries, but she clenched her jaw and endured. The cold had a dual effect, numbing the surface pain while making each movement more difficult as her muscles tensed against the chill. At the crest of the ridge, they paused again. Below, the land fell away into a shadowed valley, thick with pines and rocky outcropping. Beyond that, the jagged line of the mountains cut against the star-filled sky, reminding Anna how far they were from civilization, from help or pursuit. "Listen," Ethan said suddenly. Anna held her breath, straining to hear past the sound of her own pulse. The mechanical buzz had returned, louder now, accompanied by voices, faint but unmistakable. Flashlight beams cut through the trees to their left, perhaps half a mile away. "They found the cabin," she whispered. Ethan nodded grimly. "We need to move faster now. Stay close." The descent into the valley was treacherous, the slope steep enough that each step risked becoming an uncontrolled slide. Ethan moved with practiced caution, sometimes extending a hand back to steady Anna when her footing faltered. Ranger ranged ahead, somehow intuiting the safest path down. The dog suddenly froze, hackles rising. Ethan raised a fist, the universal military signal to halt. They stood motionless, barely breathing, as a single snowmobile roared along the ridge they had just descended, its headlights sweeping the forest below. The driver was a shadow against the stars, faceless but menacing. "He's following our tracks," Anna whispered when the machine had passed. "Not for long." Ethan pointed to where their trail descended into a stream, now frozen solid but still cutting a clear path through the landscape. Water and rock, harder to track. They followed the stream for nearly a mile, their footsteps crunching on exposed stone or gliding silently over patches of ice. The constant need for vigilance watching their footing, listening for pursuers. Fighting the cold left little room for conversation, but in the brief moments they stopped to catch their breath, Anna found herself studying Ethan's profile in the starlight, wondering about the man who had so readily abandoned his sanctuary to help a stranger. "You didn't hesitate," she said during one such pause. "Back at the cabin, you just left." Ethan adjusted the pack on his shoulders. "Stuff is just stuff. Learned that lesson in the sandbox." "The sandbox?" "Rock, Afghanistan, any desert deployment." His matter-of-fact tone belied the weight of experience behind the words. Anna wanted to ask more, but sensed his reluctance to elaborate. Instead, she offered her own vulnerability. "I've never been this scared," she admitted. "Not even when Mercer attacked me." Ethan glanced at her. "Fear keeps you sharp. Use it, don't fight it. Is that how you handle it?" "Most of the time." He scanned the darkness ahead. "Sometimes I remember that fear is just the brain trying to keep the body alive. And, staying alive isn't always the most important thing." Philosophical turn surprised her. "What is then the most important thing?" Before he could answer, Ranger growled softly, ears pricked toward the way they had come. Seconds later, they heard it too, the distant growl of vengeance. Multiple now, growing closer. "They've figured out our direction," Ethan said, urgency sharpening his voice. "We need cover now." They abandoned the stream, plunging into the thick stand of pines that flanked it. The forest floor was a maze of fallen logs and snowdrifts, making progress slow and demanding. Anna felt her strength ebbing, each step requiring more willpower than the last. The cold had worked its way into her bones, and her injuries throbbed in time with her heartbeat. "I need a minute," she gasped finally, unable to go further without rest. Ethan assessed their surroundings quickly, then pointed to a fallen pine whose massive root system created a natural shelter. "There, it's not much, but it'll conceal us temporarily." They huddled in the pocket formed by the upturned roots and trunk, the space just large enough for both of them and Ranger. Ethan pulled an emergency thermal blanket from his pack and wrapped it around Anna's shoulders. The material crinkled softly as she drew it closer, grateful for even this small barrier against the cold. Getting closer, she whispered. The snowmobile engines were clearer now, perhaps less than half a mile away and moving methodically through the forest. Occasionally, voices carried through the night air terse commands, updates on the search. They're well organized, Ethan observed. Not local police. Mercer's people, mercenaries most likely, ex-military hired by whoever took over Crane's operation. Ethan's expression hardened. That explains their search pattern, and why they're out here instead of waiting for the roads to clear. A new sound joined the engines, sharp and distinctive in the winter air. Both of them recognized it instantly. Dogs, Anna breathed, fear constricting her chest. Ethan's hand moved to Ranger's head, keeping the German shepherd still and quiet. Changes things, he said, voice flat with controlled tension. We can't outpace them now. What do we do? For the first time since they'd fled the cabin, Anna felt true despair threatening to overwhelm her determination. Ethan was silent for a long moment, weighing options with military precision. We split up. What? No, listen to me. He cut her off, voice low but intense. I'll create a diversion, lead them away. You continue along the ravine, heading northeast. There's an old fire lookout tower about 3 miles in that direction. Abandoned, but solid. You can shelter there until I circle back. Insane. You can't take on all of them alone. I'm not planning to fight them. Just distract them. His eyes held hers, unflinching. I've done this before. Multiple times. In worse conditions. Anna wanted to argue further, but the growing sound of pursuit made the decision for them. How will you find me? I'll find you. The simple certainty in his voice was oddly reassuring. He reached into his pack and handed her a compass, a small flashlight, and a pistol she hadn't known he was carrying. Straight northeast. Don't use the light unless absolutely necessary. The gun is a last resort sound carries in these mountains. Anna took the items, fingers clumsy with cold and fear. Ethan, stay alive, he interrupted, something fierce and unguarded flashing in his eye. It's all that matters right now. Before she could respond, he slipped from their shelter, Ranger at his heel. He turned back once, his face half illuminated by starlight. Remember what I said about fear? Use it. Then he was gone. A shadow among shadows, leaving nothing but his footprints in the snow and the weight of his absence beside her. Anna remained frozen in place for several minutes after Ethan disappeared, listening as the sounds of pursuit gradually shifted direction, following him just as he'd intended. The realization sent a wave of conflicted emotions through her, relief at the temporary reprieve, fear for his safety, and a strange, unexpected ache at his absence. When she finally emerged from the shelter of the fallen tree, the night seemed darker, the cold more biting. She oriented herself using the compass, identifying the northeastern path Ethan had indicated. 3 miles. In her current condition, that meant at least 2 hours of difficult travel, perhaps more. She began walking. Each step, a negotiation between determination and pain. The fresh snow pulled at her boots, sometimes swallowing her legs to the knee. Her ribs protested with every labored breath, and the knife wound in her side had begun to throb anew, the stitches tugging with each movement. One step at a time, she murmured to herself, adopting Ethan's methodical approach. Just one more step. The forest was eerily silent now that the snowmobiles had moved away. The only sounds her own breathing and the soft crunch of snow beneath her feet. Occasionally a distant echo of engines would reach her, always farther away, suggesting Ethan was successfully leading their pursuers on a different course. How easily he had slipped back into his training, becoming in an instant the soldier he had once been. Anna tried to imagine what he had been like before Baghdad, before the mortar attack that had left him the sole survivor, before he'd retreated to a remote cabin to escape whatever ghosts haunted him. He had saved her twice now. First from the storm, then from those hunting her. Yet she knew almost nothing about him beyond the fragments he'd shared. What had driven someone with his skills and experience to such complete isolation? What made him risk everything for a stranger's cause? These questions kept her mind occupied as her body fought through exhaustion and pain. The landscape changed subtly as she progressed, the trees growing sparser, the ground more uneven. She was ascending again, following a natural ridgeline that cut through the forest like a spine. An hour into her journey, the clouds that had been gathering since nightfall finally unleashed a fresh dusting of snow. Anna turned her face upward, feeling the delicate flakes land on her skin. The new snow would cover their tracks, a blessing for concealment, but a complication for Ethan finding his way back to her. Asterisk if he comes back at all. Asterisk, the thought ambushed her, unwelcome but persistent. She had no reason to believe he would return, no claim on his loyalty beyond the strange bond forged in 3 days of shared danger. He could simply disappear into the wilderness he knew so well, leaving her to fend for herself. It would be the rational choice. Yet something told her he wouldn't. The way he had looked at her before leaving, the intensity in his eyes when he'd said, "Stay alive." There had been more there than professional duty or casual concern. The snow began falling more heavily, reducing visibility to a few yards ahead. Anna squinted against the swirling white, checking the compass frequently to maintain her course. The temperature seemed to drop with each passing minute, the cold finding every gap in her borrowed clothing. She stumbled over a concealed root, falling hard to one knee. Pain lanced through her side, the impact reopening part of her wound. Warm wetness spread beneath the bandage, contrasting sharply with the cold air. Anna pressed a hand against it, willing the bleeding to stop. "Keep moving," she told herself through gritted teeth. "You stop. You die." She forced herself up and forward, ignoring the fresh pain, focusing solely on the next step, then the next. The snow was coming down so heavily now that she could barely make out the trees around her. The compass remained her only guide, its needle unwavering when everything else seemed uncertain. After what felt like hours but was likely only 40 minutes more, the ground began to slope upward more steeply. Anna's legs trembled with fatigue, each step requiring conscious effort. Her mind started to drift, thoughts becoming disjointed as hypothermia threatened to set in. She thought of Emily, her brilliant smile, her endless curiosity, the way she'd always been able to find wonder in the smallest thing. What would Emily think of her now, stumbling through a blizzard, hunted, injured, placing her trust in a stranger with his own demon? "You tell me to keep going," Anna whispered to the memory of her sister. "You always said I was the stubborn one." The slope increased sharply, forcing her to use her hands for balance as she climbed. The physical effort generated welcome heat in her muscles, temporarily staving off the deepening cold. At the top of the rise, she paused, leaning against a pine to catch her breath. Through a momentary break in the snowfall, she saw it, a dark silhouette against the night sky, perhaps half a mile distant. The fire lookout tower stood on a rocky outcropping, its distinctive shape unmistakable even in the poor visibility. Relief surged through her, lending new strength to her faltering steps. The final approach was the most difficult yet. The ground became increasingly rocky with patches of ice hidden beneath the fresh snow. Twice she slipped, each fall sending fresh waves of pain through her injury. By the time she reached the base of the tower, her hands were scraped raw, and her side was bleeding freely again. The tower itself was a simple structure, a small cabin perched atop a framework of wooden beams, accessible by a steep staircase that zigzagged up one side. The stairs looked precarious, coated with ice and snow, but they represented the final obstacle between Anna and relative safety. She began to climb, gripping the railings with numb fingers, testing each step before committing her weight to it. Halfway up, a section of railing had broken away, forcing her to press against the central support beam as she inched past the gap. The wind had picked up again, buffeting the tower with gusts that made the entire structure creak and sway. When she finally reached the cabin door, it took 3 attempts with frozen fingers to work the simple latch. The door swung inward with a protesting groan, revealing a small, dark space that smelled of dust and abandonment. But it was shelter-solid walls and a roof, protection from the snow and wind that had become her constant companions. Anna stumbled inside, pulling the door closed behind her. In the sudden stillness, her ragged breathing seemed impossibly loud. She fumbled for the flashlight Ethan had given her, clicking it on with clumsy fingers. The narrow beam revealed a simple interior desk positioned beneath windows on all sides, a single chair, a small wood stove in the center, and various abandoned items scattered about. An old coffee pot, some tattered maps, a kerosene lamp with no fuel. Most promising of all, a narrow cot stood against one wall, still bearing a thin mattress and what looked like a musty blanket. Anna made her way to it and sank down, her legs finally giving way beneath her. The relief of being horizontal was so intense it brought tears to her eyes. She should check her wound, she knew. Should try to start a fire in the wood stove if possible. Should remain vigilant, watching for pursuers or for Ethan's return. But exhaustion claimed her first, dragging her toward unconsciousness with irresistible force. The last thought she had before darkness took her was of Ethan's face in the starlight, and the words he hadn't had time to finish. Asterisk, what is the most important thing if not staying alive? Asterisk, she woke to stillness. The storm had passed during her unconscious hours, leaving behind a world transformed by snow and silence. Weak winter sunlight filtered through the grimy windows of the lookout cabin, casting pale squares on the wooden floor. For a moment, Anna couldn't remember where she was or how she'd gotten there. Then pain reasserted itself, and with it, memory. She pushed herself up carefully, wincing as her stiffened muscles protested the movement. Her side felt hot and tight beneath the bandaged, signs of inflammation, possibly infection. Not good, but not immediately life-threatening either. She had survived the night, which was more than she had dared hope for when Ethan had first sent her off alone. Asterisk, Ethan, asterisk. The thought of him sent a jolt of worry through her. Had he escaped their pursuers? Was he still alive, making his way back to her? Anna moved to the windows, using the chair for support. From this elevated position, she had a commanding view of the surrounding landscape. The forest stretched in all directions, an unbroken carpet of white occasionally interrupted by rocky outcroppings or the darker green of pine grove. No sign of movement, no tracks in the virgin snow. The world looked pristine, untouched by human presence. She searched the small cabin for anything useful. The wood stove still had a small supply of fuel beside it, old dry wood left behind by the last occupant. With shaking hands, she managed to build a small fire, coaxing the flames to life with scraps of paper found in the desk drawers. The heat was minimal but welcome, taking the deadly edge off the cabin's chill. A thorough inspection of her wound confirmed her fears. The edges were red and puffy, the stitches holding but strained from her exertions. She had no way to clean or redress it, no antibiotics to fight the brewing infection. All she could do was rest and hope that Ethan would return with supplies before the infection worsened. As the day wore on, Anna alternated between watching the forest below and conserving her energy on the cot. She rationed the small amount of water left in the canteen Ethan had given her, taking only enough to moisten her parched lips and throat. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but there was nothing to be done about that. The sun had begun its early winter descent when she spotted it, a flash of movement at the forest's edge, quickly gone again. She pressed closer to the window, straining her eyes against the glare of sun on snow. There it was again, something or someone moving through the trees, approaching the base of the tower. Her heart raced. Ethan? Or had their pursuers found her after all? Anna reached for the pistol, checking that it was loaded with hands that suddenly seemed steadier. She moved away from the window, positioning herself where she could see the door without being immediately visible to anyone entering. The minutes stretched like hours as she waited, listening for footsteps on the wooden stairs. When they finally came, slow, careful, deliberate, she raised the gun, finger resting lightly on the trigger. The footsteps paused outside the door. A moment of silence, then a soft scratching sound like nails or claws on wood. Not humans. Anna held her breath as the door began to swing open. The door swung open and a snow-covered ranger bounded in, shaking himself vigorously. Relief washed through Anna, her arms going weak as she lowered the gun. Where Ranger was, Ethan couldn't be far behind. The German Shepherd approached her, tail wagging cautiously, as if checking that she was the same person he had left hours before. Anna reached out to touch his cold, damp fur. "Where's Ethan?" she asked, as if the dog might answer. Footsteps on the stairs provided the response, slower than before, labored. Anna moved back to the door, peering out into the fading afternoon light. Ethan was making his way up the final flight, one hand gripping the railing, the other pressed against his side. Even from a distance, she could see the dark stains spreading beneath his fingers. Ethan. She rushed out to help him, her own pain temporarily forgotten. He looked up, his face pale beneath a layer of grime and what appeared to be dried blood. "Made it," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Told you I'd find you." Anna slipped her arm around his waist, supporting some of his weight as they made their way into the cabin. Once inside, he leaned heavily against the wall, breathing labored. She helped him to the cot, easing him down with as much care as her own injuries allowed. "What happened?" she asked. Already working to unzip his jacket, ran into some resistance. Despite his condition, the understatement carried a hint of dark humor. Two of them tracked. "I lost the dog, but the handlers were more persistent." Anna peeled back his jacket to reveal a makeshift bandage, once white, now soaked through with blood. "You need a hospital, not an option." Ethan grimaced as she carefully lifted the edge of the bandage. "Besides, looks worse than it is. Knife caught me between the ribs but didn't hit anything vital. I've had worse." The wound was deep but clean, a slicing injury rather than jagged tearing. Anna's medical knowledge was limited, but she had enough first aid training to recognize that he was right. Bad, but not immediately life-threatening if they could stop the bleeding. What about the others? The snowmobiles? Led them south, away from here. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, gathering strength. "Ranger and I doubled back through the creek bed to cover our tracks. They're still searching, but in the wrong area." Anna found his pack where he dropped it by the door. Inside was a compact first aid kit, far more advanced than the basic supplies she'd expected. Military-grade trauma equipment including hemostatic gauze, suture kits, and injectable antibiotics. She looked at him with new questions in her eyes. "You came prepared, always." He managed a tight smile. Habit from the sandbox. She worked efficiently, cleaning and dressing his wound with supplies far better than what she had available for her own injuries. Ethan remained stoic throughout, only the tension in his jaw betraying his pain. When she finished, she helped him drink from the canteen, then checked his pulse. Too rapid but strong. "You should rest," she said, moving to add more wood to the small fire in the stove. "We both should." Ethan's eyes tracked her movements, noting the careful way she held herself. "Your side's infected, isn't it?" Anna wasn't surprised he had noticed. "Starting to be. Nothing serious yet." He reached for the medical kit, withdrawing a small vial and syringe. "Broad-spectrum antibiotic. It'll help." She looked at him uncertain. "I should save it for you." "I already took mine," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "This is for you." Anna accepted the medicine, administering it with practiced ease that made Ethan raise an eyebrow. 3 years as a candy striper in high school, she explained, before I discovered my talent for following money trails. The cabin had grown dim as twilight settled over the mountains. Anna lit the kerosene lamp she'd found earlier, having discovered a small reserve of fuel in a cabinet beneath the desk. The weak flame cast long shadows across the wooden walls, creating an island of light in the gathering darkness. "We're not going anywhere tonight," Ethan observed. "Both need to regain strength." "What about your cabin? Will they be able to find anything there? Anything that could lead them to us?" He shook his head slightly. "Nothing personal. No photos, no mail, no paperwork. That was the point of going there, to disappear. But they found you anyway. Not me." His eyes met hers. "You. And only because I brought you in from the cold." The implication hung between them that his isolation had been broken not by force but by choice. That he had willingly sacrificed his sanctuary for her sake. The weight of that decision pressed on Anna's conscience. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for bringing this to your door." Ethan studied her face in the lamplight. "Don't be. Some doors need opening." The simple statement held layers of meaning she wasn't sure how to interpret. Before she could ask, Ranger growled softly, ears pricked toward the window. Both of them tensed, listening intently. At first, nothing but the soft crackle of the fire and the occasional groan of the tower settling in the cold. Then, distantly, the sound they'd been dreading. Engines. Multiple engines. Moving with purpose through the forest below. "They've regrouped," Ethan said, pushing himself up despite Anna's protest. "Changed their search pattern." He made his way to the window, movement stiff but determined. Anna joined him, peering into the darkness. Pinpricks of light were visible through the trees, headlamps cutting through the forest, converging toward the base of the lookout tower. "How did they find us?" Anna whispered, fear tightening her throat. "Helicopter, maybe. They could have spotted the tower, figured it was worth checking." Ethan's voice was calm, analytical. "Or they're just being thorough, searching every structure in the area. What do we do?" He turned to her, his expression resolute. "We can't outrun them, not in our condition, not at night, so we fight." Anna glanced at the pistol, knowing how inadequate it would be against multiple armed pursuers. "We disappear." Ethan moved back to his pack, retrieving what looked like a tightly folded tarp. "Help me with this, Dot." Single quotes together, they spread the material across the floor. It was a survival blanket of some kind, but more sophisticated than any Anna had seen before. One side reflective silver, the other a digital camouflage pattern in winter colors. "A special forces issue," Ethan explained, already gathering their minimal supplies. "Thermal barrier, masks body heat from infrared sensors." Understanding dawned on Anna. "They'll have night vision, thermal imaging most likely." He gestured toward the corner furthest from the door. "We need to create as small a profile as possible. You, me, Ranger. Under this, completely covered." Anna helped him move the cot to block part of their position, creating a visual barrier as well as the thermal one. Ranger seemed to understand the urgency, settling quietly in the designated corner without command. They worked with desperate efficiency, arranging their shelter and concealing all signs of recent occupation. Ethan extinguished the lamp and damped the fire to embers, plunging the cabin into near-total darkness. Only the faint glow from the wood stove remained, casting barely enough light to see outlines. "They're getting closer," Anna whispered, hearing the engines grow louder. "Under the blanket, now." Ethan's voice was firm but gentle. They settled into the corner, Ranger between them, and pulled the thermal blanket over themselves. The space was cramped, forcing them into close proximity, shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip, their combined body heat quickly warming the small pocket of air beneath the covering. "Try to breathe normally," Ethan instructed, his mouth close to her ear. "Slow, shallow breaths. Minimize movement." Anna nodded, though he probably couldn't see it in the darkness. Their situation, huddled together, injured, hiding from armed pursuers, should have felt terrifying. Instead, there was a strange intimacy to it, a shared vulnerability that created its own kind of strength. The sounds of approach grew clearer. Engines cutting off at the base of the tower, voices calling to one another, boots on the wooden stairs. Anna's heart pounded so loudly she was certain it would give them away. Beside her, Ethan remained preternaturally still, only the steady rhythm of his breathing indicating he was awake and alert. The door to the cabin burst open, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness like solid objects. Heavy footsteps entered, moving methodically around the small space. "Looks abandoned," a gruff voice said. "No one's been here for months." "Check it anyway," another responded. Thorough sweep. Thermal scanned the corners. Anna held her breath as footsteps approached their hiding spot. Through the smallest gap in the blanket's edge, she could see boots less than 3 feet away. Ranger tensed between them, but Ethan placed a calming hand on the dog's flank, keeping him silent and still. The beam of a flashlight passed over the cot, then moved on. A device beeped softly, the thermal scanner searching for body heat signatures. Thanks to the specialized blanket, it would detect nothing but the ambient temperature of the cabin. "Clear," the first voice announced. "Just residual heat from an old fire. Probably some local came up here to check the place out after the storm. Waste of time," the second voice grumbled. "Probably frozen solid in a snowdrift by now. Boss wants confirmation. Dead or alive?" "Yeah. Well, they're not here. Let's check the next sector before we lose the light completely." The footsteps retreated, the door slamming behind them. Engines started up again, the sound gradually fading as the searchers moved away. Still, Ethan and Anna remained frozen in place, neither daring to move or speak until the forest had been silent for a full 15 minutes. Finally, Ethan eased the blanket back slightly. "Clear," he whispered. "For now." They emerged from their hiding place, limbs stiff from the enforced stillness. Anna's injuries throbbed with renewed intensity, and Ethan moved with careful precision that suggested his wound was causing significant pain despite his stoic expression. "That was close," Anna breathed, the reality of their narrow escape settling over her like a physical weight. Ethan nodded, making his way back to the window to confirm their pursuers were truly gone. "Too close, and they'll be back, probably with the helicopter at first light. What now?" He turned to face her, his expression grave but determined in the faint light from the rejuvenated fire. "We move tonight, under cover of darkness, while they're searching elsewhere, but your wound will hold." His tone left no room for argument. "We've been reactive long enough. Time to change the game." The night sky stretched above them. A black canvas scattered with diamond-bright stars and a half-moon that cast just enough light to illuminate their path without exposing them. They moved through the forest like ghosts, slowly, deliberately, each step placed with purpose. Ethan led the way, his training evident in the efficiency of his movement despite his injury. Anna followed, focusing her remaining energy on matching his pace and controlling her breathing against the persistent pain in her side. Ranger ranged ahead and around them, an alert sentinel warning of any approach. The dog's behavior had changed since reuniting with them, more vigilant, more protective, as if sensing the escalating danger they faced. "How far to the road?" Anna asked during one of their brief rests, her voice barely above a whisper. 6 miles, maybe 7. Ethan was studying a topographical map by the dim light of a red-filtered pen light. "There's a maintenance access road that services the power lines, less patrolled than the main highway, and once we reach it, if we're lucky, we borrow transportation." His eyes met hers in the darkness. "If not, we keep moving on foot until we find something." Anna nodded, conserving her breath. The antibiotic Ethan had given her was working. The feverish heat had subsided somewhat, but exhaustion pulled at her limb, making each step a conscious effort of will. She knew Ethan was in no better shape. The bandage on his side had begun to show fresh spotting of blood, though he hadn't mentioned it. They continued through the night, the landscape gradually changing as they descended from the higher elevations. The deep snow thinned, making travel easier but also leaving more visible tracks. They compensated by moving through stream beds when possible, over rocky outcroppings, anywhere that would minimize their trail. "Tell me about the cabin," Ethan said during another brief pause, his voice low but conversational. "The one at Flathead Lake, where your evidence is hidden." Anna understood what he was doing, keeping her mind engaged, preventing the fugue state that exhaustion and pain could induce. "It's small, just one room and a sleeping loft," she replied. "My grandfather built it in the 50s. He was a carpenter, did everything by hand. Good craftsmanship? The best. It's weathered 50 Montana winters without sagging." She smiled faintly at the memory. "There's a stone fireplace that takes up most of one wall, with a hearth made from river rocks he collected himself. Emily and I used to count them when we were kids, never got the same number twice. Sounds like a good place to grow up." It was simple, but it felt permanent, safe. She looked up at the stars, momentarily lost in recollections. "After our parents died, I couldn't bear to sell it. Even when money was tight. It was the last place where we'd all been happy together." Ethan nodded, understanding in his eyes. Safe places matter, especially when you've lost them. The statement carried the weight of his own experience, though he didn't elaborate. Anna found herself wondering again about what had driven him to such complete isolation. What safe place had he lost? "What about you?" she asked. "Before the cabin in the woods, before the army. Where was home?" Ethan was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice carried a distance that had nothing to do with their surrounding. "Colorado, small town outside of Denver. Father was military. Mother taught high school English." He adjusted the pack on his shoulders. "Normal childhood. Camping trips, little league, arguments about curfew, nothing remarkable." "And now?" "Father passed while I was deployed. Mother remarried, lives in Arizona." His tone was matter-of-fact, but Anna sensed the emotional space he maintained from the facts he recited. "We talk on birthdays. Christmas. That's enough. You never wanted to go back? After your tours?" His eyes met hers briefly. "Some distances can't be crossed. The people who knew you before, ... They want the person you were, not the one who came back." The simple truth of it silenced her. She understood now, at least partially, why he had chosen the wilderness over human connection. It wasn't just about escaping his memories, it was about escaping the expectations of who he should be, who he had been before war had rewritten him. They continued in companionable silence for another hour, the gentle slope carrying them ever closer to civilization and its attendant dangers. As the eastern horizon began to lighten almost imperceptibly, not yet dawn, but the promise of Edithon signaled for them to stop. "Listen," he said softly. Anna held her breath. At first she heard nothing but the natural sounds of the forest. Then it reached her, the distant but unmistakable thrum of helicopter rotors. "They've started the air search," Ethan confirmed. "We need cover." Now he led them to a dense stand of pines, the branches so thick they created a natural canopy that would shield them from aerial observation. As they settled beneath it, Anna felt the last of her strength ebbing away. The brief rest had allowed her body to recognize the full extent of its exhaustion. "I need a minute," she admitted, leaning back against the trunk of a massive pine. "Just a minute." Ethan assessed her condition with a medic's eye. "Your fever's back up, I know." She closed her eyes briefly. "The infection's getting ahead of the antibiotics." He knelt beside her, checking her pulse, then the wound itself. His frown deepened. "We need to get you to proper medical care. After we get the key," she insisted. "After we secure the evidence. That's all that matters. You matter." The unexpected intensity in his voice made her eyes open. "The evidence is important, but not at the cost of your life." Anna studied his face in the dim pre-dawn light. The hard lines remained. The vigilance never left his eyes. But something else had emerged over the days they'd spent together. A concern that went beyond duty or practicality. "Why are you really doing this, Ethan?" she asked softly. "Risking everything for someone you barely know? For a cause that isn't yours?" He looked away, his gaze tracking the movement of branches overhead. When he spoke, his voice voice was low but clear. In Baghdad, after the mortar hit the hospital tent, I spent 16 hours pulling people from the rubble, some alive, most dead. Worked until my hands bled, until I couldn't stand. He paused. The brass called it heroic, gave me a medal, told me I'd done everything possible. Anna waited, sensing there was more. But I hadn't, he continued. I'd hesitated when the first shell hit, took cover instead of moving immediately to help. Standard procedure, smart tactics, but in those few seconds, people died who might have lived. You can't know that, I do know it. His eyes returned to hers, haunted but steady. The point is, sometimes the right choice isn't the smart one or the safe one. Sometimes it's just about not having to live with what happens if you don't act. Anna understood then. This wasn't just about her or even about the corruption she was fighting to expose. It was about redemption. Ethan's chance to make a different choice than the one that had haunted him for years. The most important thing, she said, recalling his unfinished thought from days earlier. It's not about staying alive. It's about being able to live with yourself. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Something like that. The helicopter sound grew closer, the rhythmic beat of rotors cutting through the pre-dawn stillness. Ethan tensed, shifting his position to better shield her from potential sight lines. Ranger pressed close to Anna's side, his warm presence oddly comforting. We should be able to reach the access road by midday, Ethan said, returning to practical matters. From there, it's about 60 miles to the northern tip of Flathead Lake. If we can find transportation, Anna added. We will. His confidence wasn't bravado. It was the certainty of someone accustomed to creating solutions where none appeared to exist. The helicopter passed overhead, its searchlights sweeping the forest in methodical patterns. They remained motionless beneath the pine canopy, the thermal blanket spread over them as an added precaution against infrared sensor. The tension stretched until the aircraft moved beyond their position, continuing its search pattern to the west. They're still not sure where we are, Ethan observed, searching systematically, not converging on a known location. Small mercies, Anna murmured. They rested for another hour as dawn gradually illuminated the forest around them. The light brought both visibility to navigate and increased risk of detection. It also revealed the toll the night's journey had taken on them both. Ethan's face was drawn with pain he refused to acknowledge, and Anna's fever had left her skin alternately flushed and pale. Ready? He asked as the forest brightened into full daylight. Anna nodded, accepting his hand to help her rise. The simple contact, warm, strong, steady, anchored her when her legs threatened to buckle. More than the physical support, it was the certainty behind it that steadied her. The unspoken promise that whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. They set off again, moving parallel to the helicopter's search pattern, staying under the densest parts of the forest canopy. The terrain grew less steep, suggesting they were nearing the valley floor where the access road would be found. With each step, they drew closer to civilization and to the confrontation that had been building since Anna first stumbled upon Ethan's remote cabin. We're going to make it, she said, the words both question and declaration. Ethan glanced back at her, something resolute and fierce in his eyes. Yes, he replied simply, we are. Midday found them crouched at the forest's edge, studying the gravel access road that cut through the valley below. The road itself was deserted, no vehicles. No signs of recent use beyond a single set of tire tracks partially filled with snow. In the distance, power lines marched across the landscape, explaining the road's purpose if not offering immediate salvation. Now we wait, Ethan said, settling into position behind a fallen log that provided both cover and a clear view of the road in both directions. Anna sank down beside him, grateful for the respite. Her fever had plateaued but not broken, leaving her in a persistent state of alternating chills and sweats. The infection was advancing despite the antibiotics. Her body's resources depleted by days of stress, minimal nutrition, and constant movement. What are we waiting for? Exactly, she asked, voice rough with fatigue. Maintenance crew. Power company will be checking lines after a storm like that. Ethan passed her the canteen. Drink, you're dehydrated. She obeyed, the water cool and reviving on her parched lips. And if they don't come? Then we walked to Plan B. He didn't elaborate on what Plan B might entail, and Anna didn't press. She had come to trust his judgment, his ability to navigate situations that seemed impossible. They waited in silence for over an hour, conserving energy and staying vigilant. Ranger lay beside them, occasionally lifting his head at distant sounds but remaining calm. The winter sun offered little warmth, but the simple absence of wind and snow felt like luxury after the days of exposure. Anna found herself studying Ethan's profile as he maintained his watch on the road. The hard lines of his face had become familiar, almost comforting in their constancy. She tried to reconcile the man beside her with the solitary figure who had pulled her from the snow just 4 days ago. A lifetime, it seemed. I hear something, Ethan said suddenly, body tensing like a drawn bow. Anna listened, catching the distant rumble of an engine. Vehicle? He nodded, already gathering their minimal supplies. Get ready to move, fast. The sound grew louder, resolving into the distinctive growl of a heavy-duty truck. Moments later, a white utility vehicle appeared around the bend, Montana Power and Light emblazoned on its side, chains on its tires allowing it to navigate the snow-covered road. 2 people in the cab, Ethan observed. Driver and passenger. No escort. How do we do this? Anna asked, anxiety mingling with anticipation. We asked nicely first. He checked the pistol tucked into his waistband and improvised from there. When the truck was less than 100 yards away, Ethan stepped out from the tree line, hands raised in the universal gesture of non-aggression. Anna remained hidden with Ranger, ready to intervene if necessary, but hoping it wouldn't come to that. The truck slowed, then stopped as the driver noticed the figure on the roadside. Through the windshield, Anna could see two men in company uniforms, their expressions shifting from surprise to concern. "What the hell is this guy doing out here?" passenger said, loudly enough to carry in the still air. The driver rolled down his window cautiously. "You all right, buddy? This is a restricted access road." Ethan approached slowly, maintaining a non-threatening posture. "My wife and I had an accident," he called. "Our car went off the fire road about 10 miles back during the storm. We've been trying to reach help for 2 days." The men exchanged glances, suspicion warring with basic humanity. "You got ID?" the driver asked. "Lost everything in the crash." Ethan gestured toward the woods. "My wife's injured. She needs medical attention." At this cue, Anna emerged from the tree line, leaning heavily on a branch she'd been using as a makeshift walking stick. She didn't need to fake the pain in her expression or the weakness in her movements. The sight of her clearly injured, exhausted, shifted the men's demeanor immediately. "Jesus," the passenger muttered, already opening his door. "Pete, call this in. They need a hospital." "No," Anna said quickly, perhaps too quickly. "No calls, please. We just need a ride to Kalispell. My brother's a doctor. He can help us." The men hesitated, uncertainty returning. "Protocol says we need to report any incidents. Please," Ethan interjected. "My wife has a complicated medical history, hospital paperwork, insurance issues. Her brother can treat her without all that." The lie was smooth, plausible, delivered with just the right notes of concern and embarrassment. Anna marveled at how easily Ethan had slipped into the role of worried husband, how naturally she had responded as his wife. The driver, Pete, studied them for a long moment before nodding. "All right, we can drop you in Whitefish. That's as far as we go." "Thank you," Anna said, genuine gratitude in her voice. "You're saving our lives." The men helped them into the truck's extended cab, making space on the bench seat behind the front seats. Ranger jumped in after them, earning surprised but not unwelcoming looks from their rescuers. "That your dog?" Pete asked as he put the truck in gear. "Yes," Ethan replied without hesitation. "Found us after the crash. Wouldn't leave our side." The explanation seemed to satisfy the men, who introduced themselves as Pete and Marco, line technicians checking for storm damage. They asked few questions about the supposed accident, more concerned with the couple's obvious injuries than with the details of how they'd acquired them. As the truck rumbled down the access road toward the main highway, Anna leaned against Ethan, partly for the practical sharing of warmth, partly from simple exhaustion. His arms settled around her shoulders, the gesture protective and natural, as if they had indeed been married for years rather than strangers thrown together by circumstance. "Rest," he murmured against her hair. "I'll wake you when we're close." She surrendered to exhaustion, lulled by the vehicle's motion and the first real sense of safety she'd felt in days. Her last conscious thought before sleep claimed her was how right it felt to be held by him, how easily they had become a unit, a we instead of two separate individuals. When she awoke, the landscape had changed dramatically. They were on a paved highway now, passing through small towns and past snow-covered fields. The afternoon light had begun to fade, winter's brief day already surrendering to early eve. "Where are we?" she asked, voice thick with sleep. "About 20 minutes from Whitefish," Ethan replied. His face was paler than before, his own exhaustion and pain becoming more evident as their journey neared its critical phase. Anna straightened, mentally preparing for what came next. Whitefish was dangerous territory, the very place where she had been recognized days earlier, the epicenter of Crane's operation. Yet it was also the gateway to Flathead Lake and the evidence that could clear her name. Pete pulled the truck into a gas station on the outskirts of town. "This is as far as we go, folks. Sure you don't want us to run you to the ER?" "We're sure," Ethan said firmly. "You've done more than enough. Can't thank you enough." The men insisted on giving them a $20 bill for food and the use of an old company cell phone just in case. Gestures of kindness that brought unexpected tears to Anna's eyes. In a world where she had been hunted, framed, and nearly killed, this simple human decency felt almost foreign. After the truck departed, Ethan led them behind the gas station to assess their situation. "Flathead Lake is still 30 miles south," he said, studying a map displayed on the gas station's wall. "We need transportation and a change of appearance," Anna added. "Whitefish is the last place I should be recognized." The solution came in the form of a middle-aged couple fueling their RV at the far pump. The vehicle was headed south according to their casual conversation, and the woman's build and coloring were similar enough to Anna's to make an idea form. "Wait here," Ethan said, approaching the couple with an easy, open demeanor that Anna had never seen him use before. She watched in amazement as he engaged them in conversation, gesturing occasionally toward where she waited with Ranger. 10 minutes later, he returned with a small bundle of clothing and a triumphant gleam in his eye. "We have a ride," he announced, "and a disguise. Linda and Bob are headed to their winter home in Polson, right on Flathead Lake. They're happy to drop us near your cabin." "How'd you manage that?" "Told them we were newlyweds whose car broke down, trying to reach our honeymoon cottage." He handed her the clothes, flowery blouse, cardigan, and knit hat. "Linda's letting you borrow these to stay warm. They're good people, just retired. Easy to talk to." Anna changed quickly in the gas station restroom, emerging looking like a different person, less fugitive, more tourist. Ethan had also modified his appearance, removing his outer layer to reveal a less distinctive sweater beneath, and using some of their precious water to clean the blood and dirt from his face. The RV's interior was warm and welcoming, Linda fussing over them with grandmotherly concern while Bob kept up a steady stream of stories about their travels. Neither seemed to find anything suspicious about the newlywed couple and their dog heading to a remote cabin in winter. As they traveled south, the massive expanse of Flathead Lake came into view, its waters dark against the snow-covered landscape. Anna felt a surge of emotion at the sight. This place had been her sanctuary once, a repository of happier memory. Now it held the key to her future, perhaps her very survival. Linda and Bob dropped them at a small market about 2 miles from the Hayes family cabin, accepting their profuse thanks with casual waves. "Enjoy your honeymoon," Linda called as they pulled away. "Nothing like starting a life together in such a beautiful place." "She has no idea," Anna murmured, watching the RV disappear around a bend. "About which part?" Ethan asked, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Any of it." She turned to face the road that would lead them to the cabin. Almost there, they walked the final distance in gathering darkness, the winter evening closing around them like a blanket. Ranger ranged ahead, seemingly energized by the new environment. Anna's fever had spiked again, making the journey feel dreamlike, distant. Only Ethan's solid presence beside her kept her grounded. Moving forward, the cabin appeared around the final bend just as she remembered it, small, sturdy, built of hand-hewn logs now weathered to a soft silver. No light shone in the windows, no smoke rose from the chimney. It looked peaceful, untouched, too untouched. "Something's wrong," Ethan said, his instincts matching her own. "Stay here." But it was too late. Headlights suddenly illuminated the road behind them, and the distinctive sound of multiple car doors opening shattered the evening quiet. "Anna Hayes," a voice called. "It's over." "Turn around slowly." Ethan's hand found hers, squeezing once. Reassurance. Apology. Promise. Anna drew strength from the contact, straightening her spine as she turned to face their pursuers. 3 men stood in the headlight glare, 2 holding rifles, the third a pistol. The leader stepped forward, his face coming into focus. "Chief Harrison," Anna said, recognizing her former boss at the Justice Department. "I should have known you'd be here. You've led us on quite a chase, Anna." Harrison's voice was almost conversational. "Impressive, really, but it ends now, does it?" She took a deliberate step forward, away from Ethan. "Before or after you explain how the department head for financial crimes ended up on Victor Crane's payroll?" Harrison's expression hardened. "You have no proof of that." "I have all the proof. Account numbers, transfer dates, correspondence, everything." "Then where is it?" Harrison gestured to the cabin behind them. "We've searched this place top to bottom. There's nothing here." Anna smiled, the expression feeling foreign on her exhausted face. "Because it was never here. The key is here. The evidence is somewhere much safer." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Harrison's features. "You're bluffing." "Am I? How did I know about the offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the girls who disappeared from campus towns across 3 states? Each question hit like a physical blow, making Harrison flinch. "How did I know about your new house in the Caymans, paid for with cash that never touched American soil?" "Enough." Harrison raised his pistol, aiming it squarely at Anna's chest. "Last chance. Where is the evidence?" The moment stretched, taut with possibility and danger. Anna felt strangely calm, as if everything, her sister's disappearance, her discovery of the corruption, her flight through the wilderness, her time with Ethan, had been leading to this precise moment. "It's with the FBI," she said clearly. "Has been since before Crane was killed. The agent who died? He wasn't my only contact, just the one you knew about. The Lior, was it?" Hung in the air between them. Harrison's hand wavered, uncertainty replacing confidence. In that moment of hesitation, everything happened at once. Ranger lunged forward, a blur of fur and fury. Ethan moved with the fluid precision of his military training, disarming the nearest gunman. And from the darkness of the surrounding forest came new voices, authoritative and clear. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." Flashlights cut through the night, revealing a perimeter of figures in FBI windbreakers, weapons drawn. Harrison's men froze, then slowly lowered their guns. Harrison himself stood motionless, face contorted with rage and disbelief. "How?" he began. "The phone," Anna explained, thinking of the gas station attendant's simple kindness. "While you were tracking us through the mountains, I made a call to the one person at the bureau I still trusted," as Harrison and his men were taken into custody. A familiar figure approached through the confusion, Diana Chun, Anna's former colleague and friend, now visibly pregnant and wearing an FBI tactical vest over her baby bump. "Sorry it took so long," Diana said, embracing Anna carefully. "When you called, I could hardly believe it. We thought you were dead." "Almost was. Several times." Anna gestured toward Ethan, who stood slightly apart, watching the proceedings with wary alertness. "This is Ethan. He saved my life." Diana extended her hand. "Then I owe you more than I can say." "Ethan." Thank you for bringing her back. He accepted the handshake with a nod, uncomfortable with the acknowledgement, but accepting it. The next hours passed in a blur of statements, medical attention, and careful explanation. Anna's evidence, which had indeed been secured with another FBI contact before Crane's murder, was retrieved and confirmed authentic. Harrison and several other corrupted officials were taken into custody, the first dominoes in what would become a far-reaching investigation into trafficking and corruption. Through it all, Ethan remained by Anna's side, a steady presence as medical personnel treated their injuries and FBI agents took their statements. Only when Anna was settled in a hospital bed, antibiotics flowing into her veins to combat the infection, did he finally step away. "You're leaving," she said, reading his intentions in his stance. "My part in this is done." He looked out the hospital window toward the mountains they had traversed together. "You're safe now. Your name will be cleared. And what about you?" Anna reached for his hand, her touch gentle but insistent. "Where will you go?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, his eyes fixed on some middle distance. "Not sure," he finally admitted. "The cabin's compromised. Need to start over somewhere? Alone?" The question hung between them, laden with everything unsaid during their days together. Ethan turned to look at her fully, his expression softening in a way she had seen only glimpses of before. "That depends," he said quietly. "On what? On whether someone might want to start over too, once all this is finished?" Anna's heart quickened. Someone who found her safe place wasn't a location, but a person? The corner of his mouth lifted in that almost smile she had come to cherish. Something like that. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle flakes drifting past the window. But inside, warmth bloomed between two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. A man who had retreated from the world, and a woman who had been running for her life, both wounded, both healing, both forever changed by a storm that had brought an injured woman to a remote cabin and taught a solitary man about forgiveness of others and himself.